He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. Hello? You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello.
Hold on, please. Okay, everybody. Aloha. Wait, we have our intro. Hold on. Oh, no, we don't have an intro. It's Stargate to the Cosmos. Aloha, everybody. Welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos on Revolution Radio, and I'm your host, Janet Carroll Lesson. And today it looks like we have Kevin Estrella, Kevin Trimmel, and Tony Rodrigues, and I've got to go into the other room and help my beloved husband get on, because apparently he's not showing as on. So let's do a quick voice check. Kevin Estrella, are you there?
I sure am. How are you?
Oh, good. Tony Rodrigues, are you there? Tony? Okay. Wait. Am I off this call?
No, I can hear you, Janet. Tony.
I can hear you.
Okay, there he is.
Okay. So Tony's there, and Kevin's there, and Kevin Trimmel is there.
I don't know if Tony's here. I'm here.
Oh, geez, okay. You sound just like him.
Okay. I do have to get Tony, and I'm not sure. He said yes, he's coming on, but I have to call him. And anyway, could you guys, Kevin, can you take the lead right here? And
Tony's here, but he can't hear us, is what it is. I'm going to hang him up and call him back.
Okay. And I'm quickly going to...
and I called Sasha, too, but he didn't answer.
Okay, I'll go get Sasha. He's got something off. Hold on.
Okay, I think Sasha's with us now.
Okay. Did Sasha pick up yet? Okay. Hi, everybody. we have a little panel tonight going here. I'm not even sure if I'm live here. Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're live,
Who's that?
and now we got Tony.
It's Tony. Hello.
Oh, Tony, good. Hi, Tony. Sorry, we have a little group call going here. And Sasha, are you on now? No, he's still there. He is. There's Sasha. Okay. Now, a quick voice check with everybody. Go ahead and start. Sasha, say hi. We're going to just do a voice check to see if everybody's... Now, can't hear you. Can't hear you. Try plugging it in the other hole. The other... They're on the side there. Okay. There you go. Now, Tony, we heard you talk.
I'm here.
Kevin Estrella, can you
Present.
say hi?
I'm here.
And Kevin Trimmel, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. And Sasha, You don't need the visual that eats up our bandwidth. So I should turn off the visual that eats up the bandwidth. Turn off the visual and say hello.
Hello.
Speak. Okay, good. Sorry. We have a group here tonight. So anyway, we're going to be discussing the secret space program and everything around that. And thank you all for showing up for today's show today. And I'm Janet Kara Lesson. And as I said, I'll just tell you real quick, listeners, that we have Tony Rodrigues, Kevin Estrella, Kevin Trimmel, Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, and myself, Janet Kara Lesson. And we're going to listen to Tony Rodrigues and Kevin Trimmel talk about the secret space program. We're going to start with Tony, because it's been a while since we've had you on our show.
Hello.
And tell us the latest. Can you hear me, Tony?
Yes, I can. I can hear you real good.
Okay, so we're going to start with you, Tony. So
okay.
Tell us what's new since the last time we spoke, and tell our listeners who might be new some of your story, and then we're going to ask you questions and go kind of round table here, especially during the second half of the show. But go ahead, Tony. We'll start with you.
Well, things that are new, I've just been trying to get my life back to normal. I spent a year trying to remember everything as best I can. I think I've been spending the rest of the time trying to forget it. Recently, I'm working on other interviews with people. I've been invited to do some other things, and I've been working on a book. I have a guy helping me write the book because he's a much better author than I am. And as it was when I began writing the book, we're kind of stuck in the most difficult parts are the early, right after I was taken, and I did it subsequent 20 and back. The early years of that were trauma-based mind control. So covering that stuff in the book and going, and you got to offer as much as you can for proof too. So covering that is kind of hard to recall for me. And he gets it too. He says he's having a hard time writing it down because some of it was just, obviously it was traumatic. So that's kind of where I've been. I haven't been too participating in much else going on recently. I don't even follow the news anymore.
No, I can't either. I just want to interject. I'm an experiencer, and I'm not a secret space program, except I had one incident, I guess, my lab. But it is traumatic. Whenever I start to write it, I kind of shut down. But I just wanted to offer both you and Kevin, as anytime you want to do a regression, we'll do it. We'll do it for free. We can do it via Skype. It's all confidential. But we can. Dr. Lesson here is He's in his 70s. He's been doing this type of work all of his life, over 50 years, and he's really good at it. So, Sasha, I spoke for you, but is that something you can agree to help to get the story out from people that get stuck with blocks?
I'd be glad to not only help you, Tony, but give you the tools where you can work through a lot of the stuff yourself. But you've got to honor your own speed of how much you go, how fast, and so there's a part of you that interrupts sometimes and saying, "Don't get into that right now." Instead of just dismissing that part, you say, "Part that says don't get into that. Tell me a little bit about your interests and why you don't want me to get into it now, and what are your concerns?" And in other words, you can go deeper if you use the blocks or the reticent as a help to you to find out how to go deeper.
I in the beginning, I guess the whole experience, because when you come forward with claims like this, so many people are skeptical, and there's such a need for proof. It's the P word. Everybody wants proof. So what I've been doing is not regressing and not doing any of the other things and trying to get all my memories back as organically as possible. And I got to say, I tend to still remember details. I'm still remembering things, but I've been kind of back to my own life recently in the last few months, and just trying to get raise my kids, and so I haven't been given. It's been kind of all that stuff. Other than working on the book, we've been devoting like one day a week where we conference call about the book. Other than that, I haven't been doing much, with what I know. There'll be more stuff coming out. I want to get to that. I got to say
that, Tony, proof is when I work with somebody, I don't care about proof. I just care about you, and I care about your health and your being able to function and be okay. And proof is what the man who doesn't entertain anything but the narrow band of the Matrix considers anyway. If you just let your own memory, the way you remember it, the way you talk about it, when you're just talking about it, not worrying about proof, you're going to get a lot more. Yeah.
Well, I did a conference I went to. I did finally talked in front of a live crowd, and I went down to Rye, Australia for the Star Family Conference, which was a great thing. And I think I learned more than I taught anybody there. But that was what I realized was that on the first day of the conference, I went there, and my whole talk was going to be based on proving my account, because there's proof. There are things that corroborate my memories and what I remember that make a really strong argument for me and can be offered as proof. And what I realized was that crowd didn't even care. And the next day for the talk, I just scrapped the whole first 30 minutes that I was going to use to prove how the research process works with people that are, and I was able to skip all that and get right to the heart of it. And they were a very advanced crowd in the subject. So I get what you're saying, but still I think every day there are more people coming into the subject and that are from scratch, that have no idea. Like, me personally, I had no idea about hypnotic regression or any of the treatments, the kinesiology treatments they do, any of that stuff. All this stuff I was just a normal guy in my life, and then got an MRI scan and had 20 years of memories reconstruct, of times that I was taken and did a 20 and back. That's basically what happened. I was just as asleep as anybody else, other than the fact that I knew about the original abduction. I always had that memory. The night of the abduction, the grays in my room, I always remembered that. So I always was like kind of in the know that there was something going on, but it wasn't until I realized the 20 and back years and it all constructed that I woke up. I mean, I'm using a terminology that everybody uses now, but basically that's true, and I was very unaware. And I think that moving forward with my account, with my information, I need to keep those people in mind, because it's really a small community that's aware, that even knows what I'm talking about, that even knows the 20 and back term.
One of the things that happened with the details, like Susie Hansen found that even though she didn't know the technology of stuff, if she talked to physicists like Rudy Shields and technologists, they knew they could supply some of the things that she didn't understand, but she observed watching. So there's that kind of corroboration too. Yeah. As the more you just make what you saw available, the more help you'll get with people that know what you were dealing with in a technical way that you don't.
Yeah, I've had a few companies reach out to me. Recently, I had a company reach out to me that saw my account, and when I spoke about how the money transacted on Ceres Colony, that they used facial recognition for some of the money transactions. There's a company that wants to do that, and they want me as an advisor. So I've been reached out to already, kind of like what you're talking about. For technology, just from that, and I don't remember a lot of nuts and bolts things, but I think you're right. It is moving forward like that. I think the audience is growing. I think the secret space program audience is growing rapidly, and
it definitely is. It's like
in a few years.
My friend put up a group with secret space program, and in about an hour, she had 1,000 people signed up. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah,
it was like, whoa. Yeah, that is the key phrase. So
I have. I've got two friends who are actually. Yeah, it's Kevin. I've got two friends who were in the secret space program, two with very different missions and very different memories. But the thing that I find interesting is that people who are starting to talk about their experiences, like you think that that'd be some people behind the scenes trying to track you guys down and take you out from speaking. But do you think it's actually that it's part of a program that this is how they're trying to leak the information out into the public through you guys?
I think that there are individual. I think there are different circumstances. I think that me personally, I was taken on an illegal basis. Like the programs have their own set of laws, their own set of rules that they follow, and I think that I was kind of shuttled through the side door and done off the record. Like it's like akin of somebody that is running a Coca-Cola factory and they run off a special Coke Lime product, and at the end of the run, when they're done with it, they go, "Hey, let's run through a few cases for us." And I think that's what happened to me. I think myself and the other kids that I went through were slaves for private people that just had access to the tech. So that's why I'm not really on the record up there. And I was shuttled through kind of the side door, so that now that I'm speaking forward in kind of public, I've had insiders there have been insiders that ran me that there's no record of me up there. So I think that's kind of what's happened with me. Personally, I think other guys, some people may come forward and be at jeopardy. There's a lot of people chattering about the one new guy, the autopsy guy, Emery, that he's been getting, a uncanny bad luck after he's come forward. But he was obviously in a more official, professional capacity. I wasn't a professional. I was a slave up there. So, I was somebody very low level that they wouldn't have to worry about. Somebody more higher up the chain to come forward and go public is far more dangerous than me.
Right. Mm-hmm. Tony, have you and Kevin Trimmel ever met each other? I mean, even on the radio?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. As soon as I heard Kevin's take, I think just his very first interview, I got a hold of him immediately, and I think it wasn't but a weekend or two later, I rode down to Canada, and he met me right over the border in Canada. We met for lunch because
wow.
You're dying to talk to other people that know what you know, that have experienced kind of the same experience. There's a real hunger to talk to other people just to get to ground yourself, because to be alone and have this many memories that don't make sense with what anybody else in the world thinks. My wife believes me, but she doesn't really want to sit and talk about it because she can't relate. And so there's a real hunger to meet other people that you can relate to, or that can relate to you as well, after what you've been through. And so I ran to Kevin, and he struck me as very genuine. And after the end of our lunch, there was no doubt in my mind that he was the real deal.
Wow. Well, that's my motivation. I'm putting on a conference in October, and it's not about money. It's about so we can all get together and look at each other and breathe the same air and share stories.
Exactly.
And connect the dots and figure it out, because I've done a number of conferences and they have the experiencer group, but my heart really goes out for people that have been, these slaves. I mean, what worst thing can happen? And you're, taken and you're put in service and you do all these things, and 20 years go by and you're back at home and you're like, what happened? What was that? That just breaks my heart. It really does. And I'm hoping there's some way we can help heal that wound and stop that on some level.
A lot of people have been really good to me after hearing the story. And I haven't really been motivated on a giant mission to tell everybody. I've just responded to requests. People ask me what happened, and I've said so. And just remembering in itself and being able to talk to other people in itself has been really the greatest healer for me, because I did carry a lot of the problems with me from the experience. I was a changed person. The day before I was taken, I was a completely different person than the day after when I was put back. I was completely changed, and then I carried, PTSD and all kinds of other traumas with me, and I couldn't figure it out. I remember being a teenager, in my late teen years, going, I don't know what's wrong with me. Asking friends, I know something's wrong with me. I just don't know what it is. I got what made me different than everybody. And now that I remembered, I'm able to assign a cause to it, and that's been just the best Band-Aid for it. Talking about it and just knowing where some bad habits come from, or where habits that I acquired come from, because I didn't know before.
Wow, interesting. Okay, so for our listeners who are going, what are they talking about? Maybe you could give them a little bit of a background on what happened to you. Sorry to come out. We're just talking full speed, but
sure.
Just bear with us. We'll give a little synopsis. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, to anybody that's listening, it's hard to put in a nutshell because it's very unbelievable, especially if you've never heard of any of it before. But in a nutshell, I went to school with the son of a boy who said his dad was an Illuminati, and I made him angry. We didn't get along. And one day his dad was at the school, and he pointed me out to him. He said, "That's that boy I told you about, Dad." And they talked about me. And it was that night or a couple nights later, it was at a very short time that I woke up and I had gray aliens in my room, and I was abducted. And what happened was I was taken and put through a 20 back, where I lived 20 years and then regressed in time and age. However they did that, technically, I'm not entirely sure. Basically, I lived 20 years as a slave through program and sold from program to program. I lived on Earth. I lived in Seattle and in Peru. I went through trauma-based mind control in Southern California in Inyokern, and then sold off to a space program, a secret space program. I ended up on Mars, and then for a program that only didn't last long, that failed, and it was canceled. So then I was aptitude tested and retrained, and ended up on the Ceres planetoid, which is right after Mars in our solar system, which is inhabited by the German breakaway group. From Germans after World War II moved out there. And it's the Ceres colony, and I ended up working on cargo ships, spaceships, interstellar ships that are trading with ET races that are ongoing. And I did that for a better part of a decade, more than a decade. I was on Ceres colony, and then they put me back. They took me back to the base behind the moon, on the moon, and then whatever system they used, they age regressed me, and then I went back through time, and I woke up the next morning in my bed. And for me, it had been 20 years, but it had only been one night. So I literally woke up and got it down and went down and had breakfast with my mom and dad and my sister. And I felt like I hadn't seen them in 20 years. And I said so. I said, I feel like I haven't seen you guys. And it was like the biggest curse of the whole thing was I had to live through the 80s twice. But that's essentially what happened. In a nutshell, without giving all the every little detail. Basically, I lived for 20 years, and I lived on Earth at the same time as myself living on Earth. So there's a lot of technology going on with time travel, which is a good reason why they won't tell us. But there's also being abused because I didn't have any human rights while I was up there, and I was treated very badly, and I wasn't the only one. There were over 40,000 slaves on Ceres colony with me. There were men that were being used as slaves, men and women, and women that were being used for sex slaves. They had a red light district. So it's not the most wholesome. It's not an enlightened thing. People think that space travel people that can travel in spaceships would be very enlightened culture, and it wasn't a very enlightened culture. It was a very oppressive culture that's up there. And so I went through that.
Who's running it?
What's funny is that's like one of the most common questions I get. People, who's in charge? And they really don't tell you. They really don't want you to know. I know that our ship, when we got in trouble, we had missions fail. We got in trouble. We had to report to a base that's around Jupiter. That was the reptiles. It was in a temporal bubble. When you go in it, you can't see any stars or anything. And you have to go back out the exact same way you came in. There was a big base, star base, like a space base in there, and it was all reptiles. And we had to report to them when we got in trouble. So they were above us. Who's running them? I don't know. I have no clue. It's kind of like your knowledge, the flow of knowledge stops right there at the next level to where your superiors report to. So you report to your guy who reports to his superior that reports to his, and where he reports to, it stops there. And then, so you don't know who's running it. They're not proud of it. There's not something they advertise, and just like the world, who's running the world? They're not going to tell us because then you have somebody to conquer. So it's a secret. They keep it a secret.
What kind of reptilians were they? What did they look like?
They were a mix. There were many. There were tall, skinny ones. There are shorter ones. In my room the night I was taken, there were shorter ones taken that were very strong. They were only about 4 feet tall, and they were very strong, and carried me out. And then there were bigger reptiles that I didn't meet. I stood outside the door that were actually in charge, that were larger, and I never met. I didn't meet one of those with my own 2 eyes. So there was a mix of races. There were insectoid races that were all. It's a confederation of ETs that work together. So there were many different races: the long-necked grays, the white grays, and the reptiles, and certain insectoids. They were all working together on the base, the original base, wherever it was. I believe it was underground somewhere that I was taken to. And then when I was on Ceres, there were. Go ahead.
Go ahead. We're listening.
When I was on Ceres, there were a couple other ET races that lived there that were more human-like. There was one, like a 7-foot tall human that had different arm proportions, like a longer forearm than ours and a shorter top arm. And then they were taller and had bigger eyes and long, straight hair. And then they were subordinate to a taller race that had very wide hips and like a completely different looking head. They had the elongated skull, but they were like far less human than the other race did. And the Germans, when the police showed up, had complete authority. So the Germans were really in charge there. So those other 2 races were working under the German command on Ceres Colony.
So these were human German. They looked human. They were human.
They were from Earth. Yes, they were Germans.
They were from Earth.
Yeah.
How old?
Wow.
Well, originally they were born there. Now like on the ship I worked on, the command crew was all born on Ceres. They were Germans that were from Ceres Colony, but the Ceres Colony itself came from Earth. They were descendants of people that had
all Earthlings. Do you have any history on when that was set up?
Taylor?
Not a lot. They had their own history. There were times that I overheard conversations about it, as far as about certain subjects of their history there. But I didn't really get an education on what was going on. I can tell you just from experience that the wear and tear on the structures in there was old. Like the hangar bay had to have been around 60 or 70 years. It had steel beams that were rusted badly. And so it was an older construction. It wasn't something that was recent, in the last 30 years even. It was much older than that. And there was old construction. There were buildings in there that looked like they were from the 30s and 40s, like an whatever Art Deco period. There was marble steps and ornamented buildings. They had one cavern. I like to say I don't know for sure it was Copenhagen, but it was a replica of a European city, and I want to say it was Copenhagen, that they had built a replica of a European city exactly inside a giant cavern there on Ceres, just for that area. And the rest of the place was... Yeah, go ahead.
Did they speak German or English, or how did you know what they were saying?
They spoke German, and there was translator technology, and it only worked in local areas. So on the ship I was in, when we had briefings in the morning, they could turn it on and off. The command would be talking in German, and when they needed to speak to me, for instance, they could hit a switch, and I could understand what they were saying, and they could understand what I was saying. I think they could understand me always, but there was an on and off switch, and then it was in the elevator too. In the elevator in the ship, when you walked, I remember standing outside waiting for the elevator, and two officers talking in German, and the door opened. We walked inside the door, and I could understand what they were saying, and they had to quit talking all of a sudden because they didn't want me to know. So it only worked inside a certain area, and then they began talking again. And when the elevator opened and they walked out of the door, I heard it as German again. So, and there were other places. There was an Italian guy, a guy from Italy on the ship that spoke only Italian, and they're only like he would come into my work area, and nobody could understand him. He was the only Italian speaker. But then at the end of the day, by the doors, there was an area that had a translation translating area, and we would talk to him and say, "What was that all about earlier, man? You seemed like you were mad. Were you mad at us earlier?" And we would catch up, only for a minute or two while we were waiting to get off the ship. There was an area where the translators were working, so that the German security guards could tell you to move along or do whatever you wanted. It was in that area.
Wow, thank you. I wondered about that.
Kevin, do you have any questions for Tony? Feedback.
Yeah,
which Kevin are you?
It's Kevin Estrella. Your time that you were gone, was it just one night, or was it?
Honestly, I think it was only. I've heard people, insiders, say that they can have you gone and back within 15 minutes. So the time that you're taken to the time they tuck you back into bed, only 15 minutes goes by. There have been people that in the. I know this because they spoke about it around me and didn't think that I knew what they were talking about. But there are people. There was a Marine that was taken, a MyLab Marine, and he was taken and gone for 3 days before he was returned home. And the reason being is because when he was up there, before he signed the contract, they gave him time. They said, "Take all the time you want to think about it," and he waited for 3 days before he signed the contract and went. And that was a gap in time that they couldn't. I don't know how that works, if it was rules or a technical reason, but he was gone out of his room. He was missing, and his mom actually had to call the police and everything, thought he ran away. Wow. And he appeared again in 3 days. But that was because he had the right to say no. I didn't have that. I was in a different treatment. So it was late at night. I mean, it had to be around 11 or midnight that it began. The phone ringing, and there were lights out flashing outside, and when they came and took me, and I woke up at I think 7 a.m., 6:30 a.m. the next morning, and had a normal day and went off to school.
Did you escape from these guys, or do they still get you?
I think I've been taken a few times for other things. I think I got followed up on a few times after that, and I think they let me go. And the thing is, they can make sure you're sleeping before they walk in the room. They have technology they can come down and put everybody to sleep from a distance. And so if they want you to not remember, they can. But I think I've been taken a few other times, but not for a 20 and back, for follow-up purposes. And Kevin is, I think, is the one that told me, once you're in the program, you're always in the program.
Yeah. What you just said there, same thing. After I went public, I had a re-abduction experience in October, and then I actually was involved in an operation with Anthony Zender in December. But again, that was outside of the 20 and back. That was just for like one night. So that makes sense.
Yeah, well, you got to think you're ideal because you've already been programmed. They already have all your medical info. You've already been conditioned for the service. I have lots of other hunches, but I don't really talk about them because they're just hunches. It's one of those things. I share stuff.
Well, I was gonna say, I got a friend who, he was in the program too, and it was his wife was the one who was frustrated when she would clean the kitchen floors, at nighttime, and every morning they'd be covered in dirt and stuff like that. And he would, he'd be gone, and he'd come in the house with his dirty boots, and his child was always wondering why his father was having a shower, like 3 o'clock in the morning. And the only way for him to know how long he was gone was by how long his fingernails grew overnight.
Oh, wow. So he was going for a long, long time.
Yeah. That's the only way he was able to keep track of how long he was gone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Wow. I have a comment on the 15 minutes. My girlfriend, Teresa J. Morris, my BFF, she says that when they return you, you're missing 15 minutes, and they're not sure how to make that up, but that happens. You're missing the 15 minutes. Is that right?
As far as you're gone out of I was a kid. I was a 9-year-old kid in bed, and a gray came in my room, and a couple of reptiles picked me up and carried me to the end of the bed, and there was a flash of light, and I was gone. And then I would assume 15 minutes later or a half hour later, another flash of light, and they brought me back. At which point I was unconscious and put me right back into bed. During that time, during those years, there were many times that I woke up with strange stuff, like my attic open in my room, which was not something that would happen on its own. There's no way it could happen like that. My attic would be open, or I would wake up and the nosebleeds and just weird stuff. Waking up somewhere else with your pillow on the ground, and like I said, they start to get crazy. Where they're hunches, they start to sound crazy. So. A lot of that stuff you just take note of. I think you sound sane.
You know what? I think your hunches. I think your hunches are probably right on. I'd really like to hear some of your hunches.
I'm fairly sure that the Air Force took me and interrogated me in. I could look up the date. I wrote it down. It's in emails, but like at the end of 16. That I was interrogated, and the interesting thing with that was I had to go and bounce that off some other researchers. Does the Air Force military industrial program, did they have time dilation tech? And researchers said that yes, they have to believe that they do, because they, I'm talking about the lower one, the lower military industrial one, that they must have had time. Whoever took me had time dilation tech, because I was interrogated for like 18 hours, and they were sleep deprived. I was given injections and tied up for like 18 hours, and they kept keeping me awake, pouring water on me, and I said, look, I'm cooperating with. I told them everything. It's not like I was. Combative. I was totally cooperative with them through the whole process, but it's just their method of that. There's a way that they do it where they kind of have to give some kind of torture to it. But they kept me up for 18 hours, and they said, and at the end, this is what I remember, is them saying, "Okay, man, you did good. We're gonna get you. You can finally get some sleep." And they untied me and took me out, and I remember that, and I remember waking up the next morning in my bed, and it had only been one night. I remember going to bed and then waking up. So I had to have been gone and then put back in time as well.
It sounds like you must have got skills, strengths, and knowledge that you wouldn't have gotten if you didn't have this other experience. I wondered how those transferred into the life of a little kid.
Well, so I didn't believe in psychic healers either until I went public, until my story came out. And then I had so many people that could say, I'm an energy worker, I'm a psychic worker, can I work on you? And I said, oh, okay. Like what harm is that going to do? And then it's actually there are some people on the earth right now that are very powerful, psychically gifted people. And believe me, I've had my eyes opened to that. There are people that have very strong abilities, and I've worked with a couple over since this time. And the one said, she said, I asked her why. I always thought that everybody was remotely psychic. I always thought that everybody could dream the next day like I do. But I did intuitive service, and the MK Ultra stuff had groomed me into the Theta program for doing remote viewing and future viewing and things. And so I was left with a tinge of it. And what she said was that they opened doors in me that weren't supposed to be opened through that experience. So that's why I remember. That's basically what happened. Is I have weird experiences. I guess with myself, with my higher self that I got in touch with during that on an industrial level. With military grade. Empowerment into my own psychic ability, which I don't have. Like I said, I'm a pretty normal guy, and so it's kind of like a side effect of it. Of that, going through that left me with that side effect of a tinge of intuition still.
Wow.
So, Kevin Trimmel, tell us about how. What commonalities have you found with each other in your stories, and what differences?
Sure, I can kind of do a nutshell of my experiences as well, and there are certain points that line up with Tony's experiences as well. Just right off the bat, the first time they took me when I was bicycling in a forest in Cambridge, Ontario, and I got off my bicycle and then to take a break, and then I looked up and the white TR3 was already flying overhead, and it was just above the treetops, so like less than 500 feet, and I could actually see faintly paneling on it, and I looked up at it, and it was moving at a very slow, like, walking pace. So I actually was able to walk my bicycle and like keep up with it. And I walked down the trail for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then the trail opened up into a field. And when I got to the field, the craft started to rise up into the air. And when it did that, I got hit with a wave of nausea, and it was like vertigo. And I had to like drop my bicycle and fall backwards and just into the grass and just sit there, and just like vertigo, where you lose your equilibrium and everything's spinning. So I put my head between my legs, and I thought I was going to throw up. And I realized later, after doing some research, that that's actually the moment where they picked me up and dropped me back off, and that's why I got hit with that nauseous feeling when they actually physically grabbed me. And but just like what Tony said, the time it took them to pick me up and drop me off, there was about a 15-minute window there of like walking under the craft, and the craft goes up into the air. I get hit with the nausea, and then I'm sitting there. I felt like really, really bad for a window of time, and then it took me a couple hours to actually like feel strong enough and well enough to actually walk myself out of there. It really, when they took me, it was maybe different technology, but it left me feeling like incredibly nauseous. So there's definitely a window of time where if someone was watching, I would have been standing there, and then I would have blinked in and out, and there would have been a window of time where like I wasn't there, and then I would have blinked right back. And I use the word blink on purpose, because when you blink in and out, it's literally as fast as you blink. And I've actually seen that before when I was on the TR3. A memory I have is we were picking someone up, and I was able to look over at the view screen at the front of the craft, and I saw a gentleman standing in a field talking on a cell phone. And then next thing I know, like as fast as I could blink, he was sitting beside me in the craft, in the chair, and it startled me because it happened so fast, like just like blinking, and then someone appears right beside you. It actually startled me, just like someone's sneaking up on you. Like in terms of physically grabbing you, it's just a flash of light, and then you blink in and out. But there is a window of time that you're gone, a short window. But yeah, just moving forward with my timeline, I remember we were taken to the Arctic first, and I don't really remember what the inside of the base looked like, because all I remember is flying into a sinkhole in the Arctic and flying into a side chamber that had been cut out of the rock, and so I know they definitely took us there first, but I'm still getting bleed through. I'm still pretty young. Usually the bleed through happens when you're like in your 30s, when it starts to break down. I'm 29, so I'm just on the cusp. But what I do remember the LOC, the Moonbase, absolutely. I remember flying into it. I remember getting off the craft, and me and some other people got shown into a corridor, and there was already at least 30 people lined up in this corridor, standing at ease, staring at the wall blankly, and they lined us up and just told us to wait, and we waited there for at least 45 minutes to an hour, just standing there. And then they showed us into like a classroom, and that was orientation. And I remember them teaching classes at the LOC, and it looked like just a regular classroom with a projector screen. And they were teaching us about the different xenotypes of beings we might encounter. They were teaching us about the different densities of matter and megahertz levels, having to do with both humans and ETs. And so that was at the LOC.
Did they mention any particular hertz and birth, like specifically?
Most humans resonate between 60 and 70 megahertz, but they did make a point that due to, but that's like people who are in optimal health, people who have degenerative or chronic diseases for whatever reason, including parasites and fungal infections, might be resonating at like 50 megahertz or lower. Cancer is like the 30 to 40 megahertz range, and so on. So they explain that it's a sliding scale based on your health. And they explain that like a fourth density being is still physical, except it's fully telepathic. And the reason for that is because it's megahertz level. And they explain that your megahertz has to do with like your auric field, and that a fourth density being is resonating at 350 megahertz at least. So their aura is so big and powerful that that's how they're able to do the entrainment. And they're literally, once you're within their field, they can lock eyes with you and they can read you energetically. They know everything about you, including your memories, your state of health, your like everything. And then they explain the entrainment process, where you would basically be pulled into. You feel like you're getting pulled into their eyes, and that's when they can actually not just read information; they can also give you information, like a psychic downloads and even talk, like literally make you hear voices, but it's their voice talking in your head. So that's the entrainment process, but they explained how that was physically possible. It had to do with their auric field being at like 350 megahertz. But then after the moon, we were taken to Mars, and that was more like physical training. That was like Qigong type stuff, but it was done in swimming pools. And it had to do with like doing the energy work. The pool kind of acted like this medium, the water, to kind of help you visualize and work with the energy more so, because you could literally create like a energy bubble around you as you were going through like the Tai Chi, Qigong type motions. And water being kind of like fluidic space, you're able to like work with the energy a lot easier in the water in terms of learning how to do that and actually move the energy. And we are also taught remote viewing on Mars as well. And that was actually, as strange as it sounds, they were Templars. They wore white robes, didn't have the Iron Cross on it, just white robes. But they were Templars, and that's where things got more strange, because it had to do more with I kind of blocked that out, but it had to do with they would give us these like drugs, and it was almost like an ecstasy or something, where you just get like these waves of, you're getting hit with like these waves of serotonin, and you're just like, you're like peaking. And then as you're peaking, they would have you, they put the piece of paper in front of you, and they write coordinates on it to do remote viewing, but they would give you drugs so that, and you'd have a spotter that was getting you to focus on the coordinates as you were peaking on the drugs. And that, again, they understand how the megahertz works. And I guess if they can induce massive serotonin release in the body using drugs, it just amps up your psychic abilities so that you can just immediately get out of body. And if you have a spotter that keeps you focused on the coordinates, you can literally describe like what someone else is wearing in another room. So that was like the remote viewing stuff. And then
did they ever do anything with LSD?
I'm not sure if it was LSD. I feel like it was, because it wasn't like we didn't get any weird. It was like a physical sensation. It was like a body buzz. It was like these ripples go through you, and you just feel like this wave of euphoria. And then you would focus on the coordinates, but we didn't get any like psychedelic visuals. It was just like a feeling, and you would just get like these little insights in your mind as you were focusing on the coordinates, and you would just say like, yeah, I'm seeing like this person, or I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that. But it was in your mind's eye. It wasn't like you're actually seeing it, like hallucinating. So it was a little different, but then after Mars, because I was used as an empath, then my recalls have to do with them actually putting me in rooms with different kinds of beings to do the entrainment, except it was more like the being would do the entrainment on me, and being an intuitive empath, I would just be prepped to allow it to do so, and then there would be this exchange, and they would basically give me downloads, and then I'd file reports because it was like a nonverbal communication. So I'd have to try to put what the being had told me in a download into words, and then relay that to the commanding officer. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Hey, was it just one way, or were you able to download stuff to them too? Were they listening to you and your concerns also?
Yeah, I was able to also talk to them, like a two-way communication. I would say they were talking like 80% of the time, and then sometimes I could ask like a question or say something to direct the conversation, because sometimes these beings had actually been captured, and they would send in an empath, and usually the empaths are non-military. They're civilian assets, and that's for a reason, and the reason is they actually don't want someone trained as a soldier to be put into a room with something that's captured, because the being can read your entire energy. So they don't want someone who's trained to kill, trained to use weapons, and would fight instead of flight, right? So it's like the good cop, bad cop, literally. And so, because they would also send in the military guys to do a more like typical interrogation, but they'd send in the empath, and we would still be in uniform, but we don't have any like medals or rank. We don't have a rank, so they could tell that we're non-military. We're just given like a guest uniform, and they could read us, and they know that we're like not a killer, and we're the good cop, and it would talk to us, and we would be receptive. And that was like that was half of the interrogation, and the other part of the interrogation, they'd send in the actual military guys to press them for stuff.
Were they suffering? Were these beings suffering?
They look scared. They definitely look scared, for sure.
What kind of beings were they?
One was a long-nosed gray. It was quite nasty, actually. It still looked scared, but it was also very, very, like, energy-wise, very nasty, and also just visually to look at. It looked like a gray, but had this big bump coming out of its nose, like where a nose would be, and it looked scary, because it also had more like reptilian-looking eyes as well. And that was the one that stuck out the most, because it almost looked like a goblin, but it was definitely gray-skinned alien, like an alien gray, but not your typical gray. And that thing, it still looked scared, but it was. I was also afraid, because it was of how scary it looked to me.
Wow,
this is fascinating.
So you did you tell the reptilian story, the velociraptor?
Yeah, on Mars as well. This is strange too, because usually the being was already in the room, and I would go in, and it was already in the room. This time I was in the room first, and what was also strange is it looked like a regular break room with 4 tables set up, and there was a counter with a sink, and they just said, the individual will be with you shortly over the intercom. And so I just thought it would be a regular person, like a commanding officer, to talk with me. And instead, the door opens, and a raptor, and it looked exactly like the Jurassic Park raptor, except it had more like arms and hands. And it comes in, and it walks towards me, and I instinctively jumped up on the counter, and just because for some reason I felt so afraid that I wanted to get higher up than it. It was like this reflex where like the flight kicked in, and I know that wouldn't do anything, but it's funny how the body will react in extreme situations and before you can even think. So without thinking, I just jumped up onto the counter, and I said to it telepathically, "Please don't hurt me." And it actually said to me, like telepathically, it said, "It's okay." And but that was also pretty extreme, and I can't remember the rest of the conversation. It just goes blank, probably from the fear. But I think it did something to calm me down.
I know what you mean about knee-jerk reactions.
Well, yeah, it's funny because like, what's that going to do? If a raptor walks in the room, you jump up on the counter like seeing a mouse scurry, well, like a mouse.
Sometimes the things take you by surprise. I mean, I had this crazy telepathic hello a few weeks ago. I was unexpecting it, I was in the process of trying to fall back asleep again. I had my eyes closed, and I'm halfway between asleep and awake when all of a sudden, with my eyes closed, this three-dimensional Zeta face appeared about 2 feet from my face. And I wasn't expecting it. I literally jumped on the other side of my bed.
Right.
Yep. You don't have control over that. I mean, it was amazing. It was freaking crazy, but I know what you mean. Your body, it's a fight or flight thing. Sometimes you can't control it.
Yeah, definitely. It's the intelligence of the body. It has its own intelligence, and it can do things in those extreme situations before the mind can, be the interpreter. Absolutely.
Yeah. By the way, you and I are not that far away. I live in Hamilton.
Oh, no way. Yeah, I'm. I moved just outside of Chatham now, but that's cool. You're in Southern Ontario. That's right on.
Do you know Grant Cameron?
Grant Cameron. Yeah, like the UFO researcher guy.
Yeah. He keeps telling me, you got to get in touch with Kevin Trimmel. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, now I get it. That's funny.
Well, good. This is synchronistic then.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Great. Okay, so Tony, back to you. Do you have any feedback or comments on what Kevin just said? Kevin.
You see, I love hearing more and more from Kevin, and what I hear a lot. I have friends of mine that listen to my stuff.
Oh, hold that thought.
Is that a commercial?
This is a commercial break.
I will.
Be back in about 5 minutes. Okay.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
download it to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea, and coming live from Kensington. Relax, let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at spacedoutradio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Let us play with all our toys and let us think that we're...
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
I don't think Janet's back yet.
Aloha, should be Janet Kirlesson telling you that you should...
This is Janet talking to the air with her thing on mute, so sorry about that. So anyway, yes, it's Janet Kirlesson on Stargate to the Cosmos with a panel with Dr. Sasha Alexson, producer Thomas Becker is here today. We've got Kevin Estrella and Tony Rodrigues and Kevin Trimmel. And we're talking about the secret space program and everything that goes on there that blows your mind. But before we get back to this show, I'd like to remind everybody to go over to the donation button on revolution.radio and please make your donation tonight. We really need your donations, and anything you can donate is greatly appreciated. Mad Painter, how are we in our count?
We got right around 1350 or so, and we need 2650, so we're still pretty low.
Pretty low. Okay, so, even $1, even $5, anything you can spare, please donate. So we were in the middle of this incredible conversation, and I was curious to know more about permission. So what I've heard from other experiencers is that they find that on some level they gave permission, even though on another level it's like, I didn't agree to this. Have any of you, we can just go round table here, realize that on some level you gave permission for these things to happen? And we'll just kind of go popcorn. Whoever wants to speak up first?
I'll just say quickly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly. I don't, personally, I don't believe in the whole I gave permission thing. I don't believe that at all. I was taken. I was 19 years old. I was bicycling on my way to college, first semester of college, normal life up until that point. In the prime of my life, that's a big year going, first year of college. And like Tony said, I was forever changed after that. And I actually ended up having to drop out of college because of that experience. So no, I did not get permission. And I think the reason why they took me had to do with the fact that my great uncle Bill served in the Navy as a communications officer, and he also served in Korea, and he was a Freemason, and he had passed away a couple years prior, and I inherited his Mason rings. I'm not a Mason myself, but being the eldest nephew, I inherited his rings. His medals, his war medals and everything went to his daughter, but I got the Mason rings. And so I think I was just next in line. And that's their belief system and their religion. And they took me because I was the eldest male heir in the Masonic tradition. And they grabbed me because of my uncle's involvement, which is something I'm still looking into. But anyway, just that's my short answer on that.
Well, that's great. That we should add that the connection with the military and the connection with the Masons. So, okay, next person.
Listen, it's still an interesting question to ask. If you had chosen this experience for your own growth and development, or for the benefit of humanity, just if you were to pretend that you unconsciously had chosen to be born a Mason's descendant, if you had chosen all these things for your own betterment and evolvement and the evolvement of humanity, what would be the purpose of, why did you do this to yourself? What are you giving yourself and the world by doing it?
Well, the secret space program, the human level secret space program, of which I was abducted into, they do it's not to the benefit of humanity. They are actually suppressing human evolution and keeping us like beasts on the farm. They're like literally keeping us under the dome. That was the whole purpose of Solar Warden, was to monitor all the ingoing, outgoing craft and to ensure that they contain the ET component from the regular human surface population or secular humanism. And so it's not to the benefit of humanity. But in terms of myself, I guess I'm stronger for it in the sense like what Tony was talking about, how they brought out certain abilities and opened certain doors that shouldn't have been or wouldn't have been open like if I had just been allowed to evolve naturally without being manipulated. I wouldn't have like those doors opened. So I do have certain abilities because of like what I went through, and it's also made me like completely like one of those ones that can see, like to use the analogy, and like they live like now because of what I went through. Like I got the sunglasses and like I can see all the programming, and I also have the traits that they brought out in me. So I guess it jumpstart my evolution, but at what cost? Because I do believe on a soul level I came here to have a human experience, and they hijacked that human experience. So now I didn't have a regular human experience.
That's pretty well said. I'd like to I'd like to answer with my side of things. He's absolutely right about that, and the only thing we can take away from that is look at what's going on now. Like maybe on some level that you don't realize, you volunteered to help out with the disclosure, with doing exactly what we're doing tonight, and that's by letting people know that it goes on, because that's how they've gotten away with it for so long. Is nobody knows. They're just so good at hiding it. But in my case, when they did ask me for permission, and I did grant permission, but I was in no way informed on what was going to happen. They didn't tell me that I was going to be enslaved and do 20 years of hard labor and be abused the way that I was. They just said that I was going to help them. They said, "Can you help us? We want you to help us, and you're going to go for 20 years." They had to, and it was a rule of theirs. So They when they originally took me, I'm laying in sitting on a table in a laboratory at some base with a gray and a reptile, and they were waiting on a DNA test. They did like a biopsy on me, and they sent it away for the test. And we had a number of minutes, 30 minutes, and they were waiting. And when they came back, they said, "Okay, we can use him. Go ahead. You got to get his permission." And I was a 9-year-old kid that thought I was in a first contact situation. I thought that I was going to go home the next morning and tell the world, my parents and the world, that aliens existed, because we had been seeing them on TV. I watched, the old show Star Wars and Buck Rogers and all that. So I thought that yes, there's finally aliens. We're going to tell. So I was excited. He said, "We need your help. I need to get your permission. You're going to go for 20 years." And I said, "No, I can't be away from my parents that long. Like, there's no way." And he explained to me that there was going to be time travel involved, and everything would be just fine, and I would go home the next morning, and I wouldn't miss my parents at all, and I could tell them about what happened. He lied on that account, and they also were manipulative in the purpose that I was being taken. He just said, help. Are you going to come help us? Well, help can mean many different things. So, was permission asked and given? Yes, in the strictest sense. So they get away with it. Was it moral? Was it the right? Was it why that reason? It was the letter of the law defeating the spirit of the law at that point, because I was misled in what was going on. And I'm sure, Kevin, I'll bet even if you don't remember it, I'm sure you had the same kind of spiel at some point thread to you. You might not remember it, but I'll bet when they took you in the very beginning, the first time you were conscious and they were talking to you, they slipped it in there. Like, so do you mind helping us for a little bit? Yeah, or some coy phrase that gave them permission to stop the more advanced, benevolent beings of the universe to step in and crack them on the head for breaking that law. It's a law, There is a permission law.
Yeah,
there
totally,
is a permission law.
Because the whole cell that they give to the Solar Warden people is that we're protecting the Earth from ET interlopers that are coming here to steal resources and also steal people for the human slave trade. So you got like a form of piracy going on where ETs come in and abduct people, or they might even come here just to grab resources like water, and they're basically stealing from us, and they're also endangering human lives, and also endangering the whole concept of the American dream. People just going about their lives, not aware of this stuff. They're trying to protect people. That's what they would tell the Solar Warden people, is we're protecting people because they can't handle the truth.
Right.
But, yeah. How did you two break through all this programming? What made you two different that you could get out of it?
Well, I think I love hearing Kevin's account because it's so much different than mine. But yet again, we have a lot of similarities. I think that he experienced something. He was taken differently. He lived a different existence up there, and he was put back differently than I was. But we were both kind of left with the same side effects, and that's kind of how what I recognized in him. We both had the same side effects in our lives from the experience, because we both have memory, because we both have the ability to access those memories, and not everybody does. And some, I think that there are lots of people that are taken that don't have a shred of memory. They go up there and come back and they don't remember anything about it. They do still have they still pick up a bad habit or have some kind of emotional side effect from the experience, from the trauma of it. But everybody does nowadays. I mean, look at how they traumatize it. The whole world is dysfunctional on some level. There are very few really emotionally healthy people walking around right now. There really aren't. And so it blends right in. You just think, okay, well, I'm just a little more screwed up than the next person,
One of my friends who was in the program, when they inducted him into the program and they put him into a young age, what they did was they used torture to eventually split his personalities. And he had his real name, and then he had this other pseudonym like Joseph 7406. And so they completely split his personality, and that was the personality who was the one who was taken to this Saturn training base to learn how to fly a craft, and he had a partner and all this kind of stuff, and he also served on Mars. But eventually he reached a point where he snapped and he went crazy, and they ended up having to release him. Does this sound familiar?
That's exactly what I went through. I went through the trauma-based mind control exactly like that, and it's an ongoing project of mine to really deal with things that I was programmed during that experience. I don't even really know how long it lasted. The trauma-based mind control, the personality splitting stuff. I eventually healed from it because it was in the early years, and later on in my 20s and back, I was just an emotionally weak person, and I still kind of am about certain things, but I wasn't anything close to what I am now back then. But but I did heal from that. I did have healing, but I'm still remembering things, honestly, bad things that they put me through in that situation. That guy probably went on to an assignment that was further traumatic. Whatever he did on Saturn, it sounds like he was exposed to actually real trauma as well.
He was hired to do some really horrible things that involved astral travel and kind of like killing people.
That would be my guess.
And shit like that,
Well, and after, believe me, I know what it feels like to have been broken by that program. It's a break. It breaks you, and it's not something I'm still dealing with. I'm still healing from that today, even though they put me back and tried to erase all the memories of that trauma. It reaches you on a more of a spiritual level. Yeah. They are really, like I said, that's exactly what I was talking about when I said they open doors that they shouldn't do, because they're dealing with your soul at that point. These are technologies that are manipulating people's souls to do things, to do a job, to do a different job. So he did that, and his soul never really had a chance to heal. Whereas mine, I was kind of a weaker, my abilities were kind of weaker than that. I didn't have the ability to kill somebody. So, and it faded once I hit puberty. In the 20 back, when I hit puberty, I'd lost the ability. So they put me into the labor side of things. I went into labor, so I was able to heal from it somewhat. But yeah, that's exactly what they did to me. As for Kevin, I don't know. I think that he went through a different kind of. He went through an educational programming. So
there was some like trauma-based stuff. Like with the Templars, they did some like SRA type stuff, and I just kind of choose to block that stuff out. Like people like Tony and others who have the courage to actually talk about the abuse. That I think that's amazing. But for me, I feel like it's not something that I necessarily have to go into, right? And I find for me, like I kind of block that part out. But that actually happened when they loaned us out to the ICC, because the ICC they were facilitating our training because Solar Warden didn't have enough personnel to actually train all their assets. It's actually a very small, like skeleton type crew that actually does that specific job, and they actually outsource their training to facilities on Mars, which are owned by private corporations and secret societies as well. And so when they loaned us out, we were being trained in like remote viewing, Qigong, all this energy type stuff, but then the SRA and the drugs was also a part of it. So basically, when we were loaned out, we were abused, and they did do the fracturing of the mind through trauma. And the Solar Warden, they were aware of it, but they were kind of indifferent because they're like, well, if it works, and they can, and also they weren't directly abusing us. They were just loaning us out. And when they got the finished product back and it worked, it was, the end justifies the means, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. You got to think about it like this. The duality of the situation is that it's a functional technology. As horrible as it is, as karmically poisonous as it is to whoever does it or however they do it, and you have to be a pretty sick person in the first place to be the doctor in the room torturing little kids. But it works. That's the thing. And it's a very powerful tool. They are able to access dead people, and knowledge of the future and knowledge of the past that is unseen. They're able to access reliably psychic information, and they can turn it on with a switch, on and off. So that's a very, very powerful technology, a very advanced thing that they're doing, that they're getting, the payback. The reward is very great for the trauma-based stuff.
So that brings up a very good point. You're saying they access the realm of the dead and people that are dead. Do you know anything more about that? How are they doing that?
Well, so when I went through it, they test you as you go, and toward the end, what I ended up doing, my first station, my first service was, they would put an IV in my arm, and I would lose consciousness. And when I woke up, everybody standing in the room would be amazed. And so they put me in Peru, in Puerto Tawantinsuyo, Peru, and that was a river town on the interior in the jungle area of Peru, a river town. And they were shipping cocaine from there to Santa Marta, Colombia. And they had lost one of their planes in bad weather. And so they put me down on the next plane. They put a new plane down there and put me on it. There was money that traded hands for me to be there. And when we got up in the air, I had a handler, the only guy in the village that spoke English. He was younger. He's like in his early 20s. And he had to learn how to put an IV in my arm, and he had to learn how to do it. He had a book, a manual, a field manual on how to operate me. And he wrapped me up in a silver blanket to block the EM waves from the airplane's instruments. He would wrap me up in a silver mesh, an EMF blocker, and put an IV in my arm. I'd lose consciousness. And he didn't believe that I was going to do anything. He was abusive to me. And the very first time that I worked, when I woke up on the way back, he said he spoke to his grandmother, his dead grandmother. And he said I spoke fluent Spanish while I was under. And I don't know Spanish to this day. I know a few words, like anybody, but he was able to access dead people. And I was I had the ability to let them know if there were going to be police or bad weather. Apparently they got lost in the weather one time, and I told them what altitude to fly to and what direction to go. And I talked them out of the storm. And when I went back, I was a hero. After everybody in the town heard about what happened, I was kind of a hero to them, but nobody talked to me because I was crazy. I would have fits of, for no reason, I would just break into tears or just have, I was kind of off at that point because the trauma stuff was brand new. There's a healing. You can heal from the trauma-based stuff, but it takes a very long. I am still healing to this day. And I'm 46 years old. I was taken when I was 9, did 20 years, and then came back and did another 37 years. So, it's been a long time. I'm still dealing with it, man. I really am. And
do you have any idea what message you delivered to him from his grandmother?
No, he never. What did she say? I did say that. So what did she say? And he wouldn't tell me. He was just like blown. He couldn't believe it himself. He was having a hard time internalizing it. And anyhow, we did those flights for once a month. It happened monthly. And he had, by the end, but there were times when he had an entire piece of paper. Like they had the weather report and knew that it was going to be an uneventful flight. There was a certain medicine that he gave me, or there was a certain drug that he gave me that they had to keep it refrigerated. So they only had it a couple months at a time. And then it would be shipped down to them for whatever they were giving me. I don't know what it was. But so there were times when they knew it was going to be a safe flight, and he had questions from people in the village written down on paper that he was going to ask me when I was under. And I didn't pay any attention to it. I was deathly ill when I woke up, and I would be sick the whole next day and just feel like I was going to die. The following day. And they put me, I had a room with a black and white TV that I lived in after the flight was over in the village.
I hope they at least gave you a bottle of tequila. Jeez.
Yeah, there was none of that. Oh, and I wasn't allowed to have sugar. No sugar was the other thing. I wasn't allowed to eat anything sweet. So I don't know why, but these are things that for people out there that practice whatever their own psychic awareness stuff. The silver mesh blanket was a technology, was something that was real, and cutting out the sugar was real.
The ayahuasca diet that shamans recommend is sugarless.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you ever done ayahuasca?
Are you asking me? Sure.
Oh no, I'm talking to Tony.
Oh, you guys still there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're still here.
All right, I took a call there.
They asked. Oh, okay. Did you ever try ayahuasca? They're asking.
Who, me? No. Nope.
Oh.
I've never had any contact with any of that stuff. And I'm not really I've never really, like I said, I've just been a normal guy, chasing girls and going and having a couple beers with my friends. That's been my life. I have a normal Midwestern life that I grew up into. And, I wouldn't be exposed to this stuff if I had lived through it myself. And so once I started doing that, I'm still learning these. Tonight, listening to Kevin, I've learned a lot just listening to what he had to say too. I like hearing that stuff too.
I got a question for you both.
Cool.
A question for you guys, because my friend who is in this program as well. I want to see if you guys were experienced with this kind of technology. It was some kind of R&R technology that they would actually let them use to escape, which is some kind of like metal chair. And when he'd sit in this chair, and it was basically like living in a virtual like reality where he could go anywhere he wanted and do whatever he wanted with whoever, if you know what I mean. Have you experienced anything like that?
I might have seen people using it. The bridge crew had chairs that kind of did that. They had a virtual face mask, and they had it was a fancy chair that they were in, but they were piloting a spaceship. But I never had any kind of experience doing that.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't recall using a device like that. Being an empath, something I noticed was they actually kind of kept me kind of apart from what everyone else was doing. Like the soldiers, the engineers, the scientists, the technicians. I was kind of in like a bit of a separate program, and also like sequestered a little bit because I was supposed to be like emotionally present and very passive. And they did use drugs, and they did have me on a slurry diet. I didn't eat solid food. Other people ate solid food. There was a couple times that I was allowed to eat like a real breakfast, and that was during like R&R, like time when they weren't using me. Like I'd have like some time off and I could eat solid food. But when I was actually on duty, it was a slurry diet. And it's interesting what Tony said about sugar, because I'm guessing it didn't have any sugar in it. And something I noticed is after I was put back, right up until 19, I had a big sweet tooth, and like I loved vanilla Coke and like pumpkin pie and like all this, like typical teenager, like and as a child, like lots of candy and that. And then as soon as I got back, I cannot have any sugar now. If I even take one sip of like pop, I instantly get like this ripple goes through me, and I just get sick, like almost like a diabetic reaction now. But I've been tested for diabetes, and I don't have diabetes. But it's interesting that I'm super sensitive to sugar. It's like my body can remember that diet, so it actually adjusted to a sugarless diet. So now I'm super sensitive to sugar.
See, I can only have sugar that's been converted to alcohol.
Right.
I bet I drink a lot of wine.
Well, hey, wine has the ormus iridium in it, so there's some health benefits there.
There you go. Well, we have another half hour. Where do we want to go with this? What haven't we covered?
Do you guys
what would you like us to know?
Oh, actually, I got a curious question. Do you guys remember? Okay, Kevin, you remember you were picked up by a TR. What was it called?
I call it a TR3 because the TR3B, like I think they've made different versions of it since the TR3B, so I just call it a TR3. But it was it wasn't your typical black triangle because it was smaller and it was white, and I believe that's used by the Canadian forces. So I think it's because I actually have recalls in the program actually patrolling the Arctic, like at high altitude, and there's actually one occasion I remember where they actually lowered us down out of the TR3. And what's strange, because they have beaming technology, but for whatever reason they didn't want to use the beaming technology, so they actually had us like rappel down, and this was in the Arctic, and when we looked, we had like night vision goggles on, and when we looked down this hill, there was a pine forest, and because of the night vision, we could see 5, strange as this sounds, 5 large Sasquatch-looking creatures, but we were told they were ETs that weren't supposed to be there. And there was 2 standing at the tree line, and then we could see, because of the night vision, 3 standing further back, hidden in the trees. And you wouldn't have seen them without the night vision. And for some reason, they wanted us to rappel down. They didn't beam us down. So, and I don't know why, but I guess it had to do with the operation. They wanted us to actually physically rappel down, maybe because they were worried that those ETs could interfere with the beaming technology, possibly. But anyway, so the point is the white Tier 3, I think it patrols the Arctic. That's my point.
And you think it was Canadians that were involved?
Well, I am a Canadian, and I was in Canada when I was picked up. And, I mean, we do control a large portion of the Arctic, so that's just my own, deduction on that.
They didn't say about or something like that, or A, to give it away if they were Canadian. So.
Well, I mean, like, they didn't have, like, Canadian, like, flags, post, like, like they didn't have a Canadian flag on it. But I'm just, we're a part of the British Commonwealth. So I think, like, this is my theory, but I think that we work very closely with the UK and Australia and the British Commonwealth countries, and we have the Canadian forces act as an auxiliary force to both the Americans and the UK and our Commonwealth allies, and we're kind of like middlemen and auxiliary force people that kind of offer logistical support for both Americans, Europeans, Australians, etc. But that's just my own theory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Josh, you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that the state of things right now is kind of quieted down. There was a lot of talk about disclosure and everything. It seems like everything's kind of quieted down a bit. I think now's a great time to regroup and for everybody to get some writings out, and take it to the next step. I know that there are people working on scripts for shows, movies that are going to talk about 20 and back tech. And I think that we got the first bit of information from everybody, and now that's kind of a breath. And it's obvious that we've had a bit of a shooting war over the last 6 months with that whole. I think the whole missile in Hawaii thing was part of it. During that same week, there were missiles over Michigan meteors, and I think there's been a lot going on behind the scenes that is. Ramping up.
Tell us more about the missiles over Hawaii, because I was sitting in my living room, and they both went off. Both my phones, they were getting recharged, and they both went off because it was early in the morning. And Sasha and I were having a little argument. It was kind of funny. And I went over and said, incoming alert missile. This is not a drill. This is real. You got basically like 15 minutes. Get your life together and kiss your ass goodbye. So I walked over to the door where Sasha was. And I said, "Honey, we got an inbound missile and we're going to die in about 15 minutes. We got to figure this out, or say goodbye at least." And so anyway, he didn't believe me. He didn't believe me at all. So I called my sister and I said, "Well, I don't know if it's real or not, but I'm going to. I could be dead in 15 minutes here, or maybe it's 5 minutes now. I don't know. You might hear this thing going off," because time was going by, and I was just in shock. And so then we found out it was quite a delay, and I knew immediately. I go, "Oh no, this isn't any kind of story like they're saying somebody screwed up." I go, they were trying to figure out what to do, and they did something. So that night I got a very vivid download. It was up above. It came from up above, and it got shut down from the good forces up above. And it was a very clear download. I'm an ET contactee, and it was very clear. So I went and put it out on Facebook. And then Dr. Sala had a report saying, or somebody had a report that it was a sub, that it was one of the World War II subs, or a captured sub, or Israelis. And all these stories started going around. But then they said, no, it couldn't be that kind of sub, because they can't launch, from above up high into the atmosphere, the stratosphere. And it had to be something else. So anyway, then Corey Good had his stuff. So I'm curious, what was it from your perspective?
Well, last time we were talking, Janet, you recall that Kevin Trimmel.
Okay, yeah.
You remember last time we were talking with Anthony, we ended the show as we were just getting into a recall having to do with the sub. And
Anthony Zender.
Anthony Zender. What happened was in December, and I wrote it down on my timeline. December 5th, I had a re-abduction experience, and I was with Anthony, and we were on the TR3, and they had us remote viewing a submarine. And it was a black submarine cruising on top of the water, and we were flying above it. It couldn't see us. We were cloaked. They had us remote view it, and we were tracking it, and that's all I recalled from it. And so I spoke to Anthony on Facebook as soon as I, came out of it and got online, and I said, like, hey, I just had this, like, dream of tracking the submarine with you. What do you think? And he was like, well, yeah, I just had the exact same dream. Like, it really tripped him out. So anyway, that was on December 5th, and I'm sure I'm off Facebook now, but I'm sure in our conversation history, he can still look, and it was definitely in December when we were talking about this. And then what happened with a month later, what happened in Hawaii, Anthony feels like they grabbed us for a night, and they actually brought us a month into the future, and they had us tracking what he believes is a Cabal submarine. And what they were trying to do was they were going to do the classic problem, reaction, solution thing. They were going to launch a missile at Hawaii and probably blame it on, like, North Korea or Russia or China, whoever they wanted to blame it on, and literally cause, like, a Pearl Harbor event, history repeating itself all over again, so that the American people would feel threatened and act out of fear, and they would want to retaliate against whoever they blamed it on, and that could actually cause World War III to happen. And I, like, for people who are awake and aware and in the truth movement, like we would see it for what it is. But for the average person, I mean, if they said, like, North Korea just fired missiles at Hawaii and 50,000 people are estimated to be dead, and the president got on there and said, okay, like, we're going to retaliate. I don't think that there would be that much protest to stop it. Going to war.
It's been done throughout history. That's how World War I was started. Assassination of one president.
That's the MO.
They blame somebody else. That's how we've done it.
Exactly, and like the sinking of the Lusitania, I can't pronounce it, but they also, to draw the Americans into World War I, they purposely sank that cruise ship. So a bunch of Americans died, and they blamed it on a German sub. And it's possible a German sub did do it, but they purposely sent that cruise ship out into German-controlled waters.
That's right.
Knowing that the U-boats were out there. And so they sent those people to their death, and they were like, so anyway, they've done that many times before.
The same thing with World War II. The Secretary of the Navy told Roosevelt that Yamamoto was coming with the Japanese fleet heading straight for Pearl Harbor, and they'd already been cut off from Southeast Asian rubber. The Navy guy wanted to put the fleet in defensive position, and Roosevelt had made a deal with Churchill and said, no, I want maximum casualties so that we can declare war on Japan, and Germany will declare war on us, and we can save Britain.
Exactly. And also, too, Pearl Harbor, they purposely had all their older ships that were actually outdated, and so that the older outdated ships would get bombed so that they could, when they were destroyed, they could remake new ships, and they would be modern day ships, because most of those ships were actually older, outclassed by the Japanese fleet, and they wouldn't have been very effective against the Japanese fleet anyway. So they purposely put the old stuff to, like, scuttle it, and they used the Japanese to scuttle their Navy fleet, their old outdated fleet, and then they built a new fleet to go at them again at the Battle of Midway.
Right.
Disgusting.
And 9/11, you got to really look at that too. The Twin Towers were brought down as an excuse to kill Iraqis and take away whatever civil liberties we thought we had.
I was waiting for somebody to say that.
Well, the thing is to keep an eye on what's going to happen next. You got to think. The other thing is how do I frame this? A lot of people are like, there's no good guys. It's all just one bad conspiracy. Even the good guys are bad guys in a conspiracy. And at some point you have to say, I hope that you have to trust that somebody up there has access to to the higher ends of these programs is a good person, is doing the right thing for the rest of us down here.
I hope so.
You know, because we really don't have a choice. Is there a way that we could ever force disclosure? I mean, is it possible if we got 1 million people together and marched on a secret location, Area 51, and if 100,000 people just walked right in the gate, could we force a disclosure? Is there something we could do? In other words,
that's a great idea.
I think we are disclosure.
Disclosure is already happening.
We are, but you know what? Out of the mass of the world, we're just a very small little pinprick. You know, you take 1 million people, 2 million people, 5 million people that know about it. That's still just minuscule compared to the 7 billion, going on 8 billion people. So many people are just far removed from our information that we're talking about.
The point where you reach critical mass, and it's like the minority. Honey, you remember the experiment where they had a room full of clocks, and they only had a certain percentage of clocks that were at a different time, and when it reached a certain amount, the whole room switched to the same time as the ones that were the different one. Do you remember that experiment? And then there's, of course, the 100th monkey, or, you know, it's because it's feeding into the grid. So there's a point of critical mass where things shift. And we don't know that magic number, but we're working for it.
It's basically any system. Any system has changes in energy that run through it, they're called perturbations. And when they reach a certain critical mass, either the structure is destroyed or it organizes into a larger structure. That's the way everything works, according to Preacher Gene.
Right. Interesting. So, well, we're definitely being perturbed.
Yeah.
These days. You know, we're definitely under a lot of...
Sorry, I just wanted to say something. Tony, I think Tony's right, though. I got to say, like, we get asked this a lot, like, well, like, if you're talking about this stuff, like, why aren't you guys dead? Like, why aren't people, sent after to kill you? And the reason is they're probably laughing at us up there because they're like, no one's going to believe you guys anyway. That 1% of the population might believe you or be open to it, and watch one of your videos. But even if you get 100,000 views, which we don't, then that's only 100,000 people out of 7 billion. And out of those 100,000 views, most people don't even believe what we're saying. It's just because you get a certain amount of views on a video doesn't mean everyone is supportive. A lot of people are like, "Oh my God, no, sure. This is just BS." So most people don't believe it anyway, and that's why we're not really, assassinated. Is because we're not even close to critical mass. We're at like 1 to maybe 2% of the population that really has this down, and then 98% are just totally, in their own little world.
Yeah, we're
one way to look at it is it doesn't. You don't know whether you're ever going to have an effect or whether you're going to reach any goal of disclosure. But what you do know is how you walk the path, and maybe the path is the goal, and the challenges are what give meaning to your life. I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Well, a lot of people want it to happen overnight, which wouldn't be bad. Trust me. I think if they just came right out and we had Trump on the news tomorrow with a bunch of grays standing around him, and they just dumped it all on us. I think it would work out. But we're unaware of a lot of the things forces against us. But what's going to happen realistically is we're probably the second generation. I mean, when did they start really talking about a secret space program? In the 90s, maybe? There was a few guys here and there.
Yeah, they weren't really calling it that. That the secret space program is kind of a catch keyword, and it's really catchy.
Right, we're the first generation saying that. Right, that has that phrase. That are Corey Goods really blazed a trail for that for other people to come up behind him. So we're the first generation of that, or the second generation of people that are talking about it. It's going to be the third and fourth generation that build upon what we leave behind. The information that we put out there is going to get built upon, and then they're going to disclose. I hope I live to see it, but I know that when they disclose, they're just going to be laughable lies that they tell us. It's going to be laughable. You can see it coming.
The disclosure that's
I've
happening.
had a little bit longer life than you hear, and Sasha's had an even longer one. And I've seen an incredible amount of changes in the effectiveness of people, going into a new paradigm. This is the one of consciousness. And when I was a child, And the World War II had just ended 9 years before, and Sasha went through World War II. So we've seen a lot of history. But, you know, you couldn't even talk about anything. You couldn't even talk about anything paranormal. If you said ghosts or reincarnation, you know, you got ridiculed. So we've come a long way, baby. We're talking about the... And so, you know, are we co-creating all this in some way?
We are.
That's what we're looking at. This is virtual reality, and that the more we open our minds, we talk about these things outside of the box, the more we're creating all these variety and variations. So, yeah. So go ahead. You were going to comment. Yeah, we're absolutely doing that. What do you mean by that? What's your experience with that?
About, excuse me?
Yeah, you said we are creating it, so you were chiming in.
We are. I think it's a snowball effect, and I think we've got a very tiny snowball going right now. It's gonna get to a larger snowball, to an avalanche soon, but you know, it's hard to tell. But I think we're on the smaller side of disclosure right now, of people that are remembering what happened to them and then coming forward to talk about it during using mediums that we have access to. Like I said, I'd like to think that the things I've said and exposed aren't going to be provable until after a disclosure, and that somebody is going to find my information useful at that point to come back and go, oh, wow, this guy told us about that.
I don't think it's a matter of proving it, because we never could even prove Jesus. But we have billions of people believing in Jesus. So I don't think it's proving it. I think it's capturing the imaginations, and they start to believe it, which is live it. They live it. They start to live it. They start to live from it. And that's even more powerful than being able to prove something, because the things that we can't prove have taken over the world.
Yeah, you said it. Like, to live it. This is I think Grant Cameron actually mentions this. He says that when you're an experiencer, you're talking about something you know. And that's different than belief, because what you know is what you experience. So like when I talk about something I actually physically saw, that's me talking about, you know, an experience I had, and I know that happened because I experienced it. Now, when I say that, people may choose to believe it, and if they choose to believe it, then that is belief at that point, because they're choosing to believe that what I'm saying is true, and maybe they may have had something similar happen to them, and that might actually prompt them to believe me even more so, opposed to someone who has never experienced that. They might be a little bit more skeptical. But as more and more people experience this stuff and start to remember, and I think Tony's right that more and more people are going to have the courage to come forward and talk about a possible 20 and back, because they're getting, you know, the bleed through memories, especially in the form of like vivid dreams. More and more people are going to continue to talk out about their experiences, but it has to come initially. It has to come from the experiencers who know what they went through, and then whether or not the average person chooses to believe, that's like a separate thing.
Right on.
Well, what we're
I find that a lot of people, when you teach people deep meditative techniques, I do holotropic breath work, or you facilitate entheogenic journeys without any direction at all. A certain amount of people start recalling extraterrestrial stuff. The thousands of people that Stan Groff and I and others have worked with in holotropic breathing, where people go into very, very deep state. After a while, almost everybody it recalls past life, or they have past life imagery. They have imagery of being on other planets, of having other bodies, of having simultaneous existences. It's like having spiritual attachments. It's all there. You don't even have to go specifically after it. All you have to do is put aside the matrix and go deep, and everything that's there comes out because it's in you.
Yeah, totally. Like if more and more people, like a secret space program aside, so many of us have come from other places and are star seeds on a soul level. So by doing like past life regression, just that, like never mind the secret space program, but like imagine if we as the human race acknowledge the fact that just life exists on other planets, and we have had previous incarnations on other planets, and then we came here to have a human experience for whatever reason. I think even just that. On a universal level, if everyone kind of accepted that, that would just jump us way ahead in terms of our evolution.
Yeah, and you've got the basic skill. You've got the basic skill, Kevin, that can really save humanity, which is empathy. That's what we all need to be able to look in each other's eyes and feel our oneness. And you've already got that. You had it. That's why they chose you. But that's the skill I think that can bring peace to us.
Well, that's. I actually was at the Ozark UFO conference over the weekend, and I met a gentleman. I met a gentleman who I pointed him out at the beginning on Friday, and I recognized that he was different. And because I had met a Star Nation being at the Alien Cosmic Expo in Toronto last year, and it wasn't until after the event, but the last thing he said to me when I finally realized that he wasn't human, because he pat me on the back and he said, "I'll see you back on the ship," and then he waddled off. Yeah, and
they do walk different. That's a good detail there. They carry themselves differently. That's such a good detail.
It was almost like he had a long tail, because the way he waddled off. But this person who I met over the weekend, because he approached me on the Sunday, and then he started saying some things to me that he was talking from something deeply profound, that he knew me at a deep level, and I knew right away, this guy is not. I don't think he's human. And he said to me about the reason why the planet is shifting is because of the drop of empathy of the human race, that it's dropped like 40 or 60% in the last 20 years, and this is unacceptable. Humanity, if they lose their empathy, they lose everything. So this is critical. But the other thing, what was the other thing that he told me? Oh, shoot. Oh, now I forget what it was. Darn it. Oh, I lost it.
By the way, Kevin, are you going to the Alien Expo in Toronto in June?
Absolutely, yes. Okay.
Well, I'll see you there. I'm going too. A friend of mine named Mike, he's actually he got a booth there. He's actually going to be demonstrating an electrogravitic lifter, like a triangle that lifts up. Using electrogravitics. So he's going to be demonstrating that at the expo. So I'm going to go to support him, and so I guess I'll see you there.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely be there. I'm supposed to be interviewing everybody. Actually, I remember the thing I was going to say. It's in regards to what's happening with disclosure, because Grant Cameron actually made a good point of it. It's not disclosure; it's actually affirmation that's happening now. It's already started. I mean, to the Stars Academy with Tom DeLonge are well working with this. There was the announcement on December 18th that went across all the news. The New York, the Washington Post, CNN, Fox, whatever, of that video of that F-18, chasing that UFO. That's the first video that came out. Very shortly after that, there's a second UFO video that came out showing another entity. What they're doing now is there's going to be a lot more of these drops that are taking place at the mass media, and there's multiple sightings that are happening now on a crazy level. 2018, as I've been told by people who have gotten downloads, is the year that all the pieces are put together. It's a year that is the beginning of the end and the end of the beginning. That basically it's going to be the affirmation where people will no longer be able to say, "Oh, UFOs don't exist. Oh, they actually are here," and they're setting the stage. Okay, this is the disclosure is going to take place now from 2018 all the way to 2021. But what we have to be very careful of is that this is also setting the stage for those people who still want to maintain and be in control, and there's still a danger of an alien false flag invasion, which may put us all into danger, because it could end up turning into something like a remember what happened to the Japanese who lived in America after World War II. What happened? They were all put into concentration camps. It's very possible that they may do that with all the experiencers. Will be seen as the enemy if this alien false flag gets to a certain level.
I'm not going to go down that reality. I'm sorry. We're running out of time, so I'd like to bring just 30-second closing statements, because I think our thing's going to go off in 2 minutes here. So, Anthony, say goodbye. Closing statements. Yes.
Thanks for having me here. It's been really good talking to all you guys. Kevin, I miss you, man. I hope we talk again soon. To anybody out there that has fragmented memories, and it doesn't have to be of flying through space, just fragmented memories. That whole subject is something that's very what do you call it? Swept under the rug, and it's very important for people to work on it. There's a lot of things happening that you can do and research, and like you said, like you offered the work to me. To anybody out there that has that, just you got to keep hope and keep in mind that it's going to take a long time, and keep at it, because if you have a hunch in your stomach, you probably should follow it. A lot of people have the memories and it doesn't make any sense to them, so they just brush it aside. But don't brush those aside. If it's reoccurring, if you're attracted to this subject and you have reoccurring fragmented memories, even a flash, you should just dwell on it and concentrate and give it a day and take your time and try to remember I guarantee there's more. And the other thing is about the system, like you said, the empathy of everybody. The people that are doing well in the system will resist a change to the system. So when you have lack of empathy, it's because people have everything taken care of for themselves. People that are doing well in today's world don't want to hear about your little change or what, they don't want to hear about what's wrong with it. So they're the hardest ones to get to. And it'll change. It'll come around. Hopefully that doesn't require some kind of event to shake them off their high horse. And everybody just needs to perk up and kind of pay attention a little bit more often to what's going on. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin.
Well said, Tony. It was really good to talk to you again. I miss you too, and we'll definitely be in touch. And then Kevin, let's meet up at Alien Cosmic Expo, and that'd be cool to meet you in person as well, man.
Absolutely.
And we're out of time. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Thomas Becker. Thank you, Liz. Aloha, love, and blessings.
Make it aloha.
Hey, had a great time. Good night.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
In breaking news, a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a fifth-dimensional consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A, for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitor's peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you. Why am I here? You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here.
You haven't answered my question.
The Matrix is older than you know. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation.
Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lassonde.
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it? That the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes? That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because